Okay, so my name is Nick Cordy. I am actually during the day and sometimes in the middle of the night a solution engineer at VMware. You are at the Dallas-Fort Worth SpiceCorps meeting, our virtual meeting. We aren't meeting in person, at least in this area. Maybe in some other areas of the country they are. But if this is your first time at SpiceCorps, let me tell you a little bit about it. So this is a group of IT generalists. The people on the phone come from a lot of different backgrounds in IT, do a lot of different things. Some people highly specialized, some more generalized. When we have our meetings like this, a lot of times they're in person in Dallas-Fort Worth. But when we have our meetings, usually we have a sponsor of some sort, and we ask them to bring us technical content. Take the sales stuff out of it, give us nerdy technical information. So rest assured that if you registered for this meeting, the registration went to me and no one else. I'm not going to sell your information to anybody or anything. So we're focusing on the technology. SpiceCorps was originally formed out of a small business IT conference called Spice World that started in 2008. SpiceWorks, the company, makes help desk and inventory software, and they've branched out a little bit since that time. Now it's SpiceWorks Ziff Davis. But after that conference in 2008, people wanted to meet up in their local areas to talk about SpiceWorks software that they used. And then it kind of morphed into generalized IT. So in this group, we've talked about things like backup and recovery. We've talked about security. We've talked about hardware. It spans the gauntlet. So I would encourage you, if you're not a member of the SpiceWorks community, to certainly join up. It's free, a nice forum to answer all kinds of questions, and you can find a SpiceCorps in your area by looking those up, and I'll put some links in the chat. That's also free. Like I said, sometimes virtual meetups, at least this year, but a lot of times there's an in-person meetup. It's great networking, maybe outside your normal network of peers. So today, we're going to be talking about VMware's Nyansa technology. And the guy that knows all the information about that is David Dipert. So I'm going to pass it over to him, let him introduce himself. And like we said, if you have questions, unmute yourself and ask, or pass it to me in the chat. We'll make sure that you get your question answered. Also, if you are a SpiceWorks community member, you should be getting Spice points for attendance. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the attendance window and keeping track of that. So if you think I might not know your community name in the SpiceWorks community, mine is Network Nerd, make sure and pass that to me in the chat so that I can award you your points, because it's all about the points, right? Everybody wants those. So here we go. Over to David, and I'll stop talking.
Thank you very much. So I'm Dave Dipert, and so my background is really in the network space. So I started out in the military doing circuits, doing satellite information and stuff like that, and then transitioned over into IP networks, routing and switching. Worked for a couple ISPs, worked for Red Hat, and really about 15 years ago, I kind of got saddled with, hey, you know something about Wi-Fi? It's like, yeah. Well, now I'm the Wi-Fi guy. And so that's really what I've been focused on for really the past 15 years or so. And today what we're going to look at is Nyansa, which is getting rebranded. And you guys are going to really be the first to really hear this. It's being rebranded as Edge Network Intelligence. And so that's what the product is going to be named going forward after next week. And so you'll hear that in documentation, coming out of VMware World and places like that. Now, just to give you some background on the company, I'm going to share a slide, and I don't have too many slides to go over, but what we were really founded to do is we were looking at problems. And kind of, if you look at kind of the history of data center and, kind of where technology has gone, a lot of people have made products to go into the data center to look at how does an application perform in the data center. Well, there's this whole other piece that is kind of lacking in, well, getting to the data center, how is that portion of this really working? If I can't get to the data center, the data inside the data center really doesn't do me any good. And so looking at big populations and looking at how people are connected going forward, wireless was really our primary means of communication, and the biggest problem in kind of what we saw. So, you know, we were founded in 2013. We have 3 founders, all really smart guys. We have a PhD, and the other 2 have master's degrees from MIT and Harvard. So some really good technical people. Not only that, they're just good people as far as, you know, if you ever get to sit down and talk with our founders, Abe or Anand or Dan, please take that time. They're really just really good people to talk to. So the problem we started with really looking into is that Wi-Fi dilemma. And it's a problem that, you know, kind of goes all over the place as far as what you see in the network, you know, where and how people access. You know, is somebody, you know, behind a bunch of filing cabinets? You know, those metal filing cabinets are going to have an impact on what Wi-Fi does. And so how do you really see that? How do you be proactive in understanding where there's problems in your network? And then also alerting you, hey, there's problems in your network. What are your normal baselines to your network? What is performance like in different offices, in different applications, in different services? So we will get into baselining the application, and then looking at, well, do I have certain areas that I have problems, and what type of problems do I have? Kind of an offshoot that we have found after we deployed and we had customers asking was, well, you're doing a bunch of stuff on the wireless side. What happens to our wired data? And so we can absolutely take wired data, and when we get into the next slide to be able to look at a deployment, you'll understand why. The next thing really came out to be, what is behavioral analytics of my devices? Now, what we really looked at there was IoT devices specifically is what we're going to look at. And inside those IoT devices, do they have certain behaviors, certain things those devices do? And are there other similar devices doing different things? And what do I mean is, like, if you think about, let's say you had a building and it had 5 thermostats in it. Well, if you take those 5 thermostats, all like a Nest or something like that, they should kind of do the same thing. Well, do you have one randomly start to talk to China? Do you have one starting to talk to more destinations, internal or external to the network? Those are the type of behavioral pieces that we'll start looking at in the IoT piece of it. Now, I got a slide up from, it's a little bit old. It's about a year old or so, and it has some of our customers on it. Definitely not a complete list at all, but just wanted to kind of throw it up there so people can see what our customer mix and base looks like. Now, I'm going to move on into this deployment slide. Let me build this slide out for you guys. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I see presenter view at the moment, actually. Or,
okay.
Excuse me, I see your notes. You need to
my
swap.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Up there where it says swap displays. I think that's all you need.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't get anything up that says swap displays. So.
Well, you may need to stop the share. Just stop the share briefly on your side, and then as long as you're in presentation mode, just pick the PowerPoint presentation mode part, and I think it'll fix it.
Okay, let me see if I can. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Yeah, it's not letting me do that. Yeah, I'll just keep sharing as the notes aren't any big deal. There's nothing in there that I'm worried about. Should be no.
Do you have 2 screens?
It's a single screen. It's just monitored on both.
Okay. Do you want to just share your whole screen instead of just PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can.
Will that do it?
Yeah, that may do it. Let me get rid of some of these other.
Yeah, all the secret under NDA stuff, right?
Email and all my normal work stuff.
Makes sense. There we go.
Are you still seeing presenter mode?
I do. Do you see the very top bar that says?
Let me try it one more time. You see it now?
Mm-hmm. That looks better.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about the technical difficulty, guys. So I just wanted to put a quick slide up here on how we deploy some of our data feeds, just so you understand of what we're getting from the network to understand what's going on. So this right in the center of the screen, the Voyance crawler, that is either a hardware or a virtual appliance that needs to be installed on the network. And it's really there for a collection device. It's there to be able to get all of the feeds that we need. So kind of some major feeds that we're looking at, think about like from Wi-Fi, we're gonna do SNMP traps from like Cisco, Aruba, and Mist. Also from the switch side, router side, we're able to pull those SNMP traps also. We're also gonna look for a span or a tap. So we wanna get raw network data into the product. Some of the other feeds that we're gonna be looking at, like NetFlow, radius syslog information. We have an integration with Cisco UCM, Skype for Business, and just released Zoom, and those will be API calls. And as I said, that crawler is really there just as a collection device. Now, one of the things that happens inside the crawler, especially on the span data coming over, is we drop all of the payload of every packet at the crawler. We don't really care what you're doing with the application. We're concerned about metrics to and from the application. Like, did you go to Facebook? Yes. Did you go to Farmville? I don't care you went to Farmville. What I care about is you got to Facebook. And what did that time represent getting to and from Facebook? And so the crawler itself, being on the network, then also needs to have either a public or a private cloud. Now, our public cloud is hosted. You can buy a service from us, and your crawler would just be an instance on our public cloud offering. Now, some customers decide, hey, we don't want our data in the public cloud, and so they can opt to deploy a private cloud service. Now, the services work exactly the same. You'll just log into a website, you'll get the data, and I'll show you during the demo. It'll look exactly the same. It's just a matter of where does the data get housed, your site or in our public cloud. Now, one of the other optional fields that we have, and in which just being revamped, is the client agent. So we had a client agent, let's see, I guess for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And it was to give us some additional data points, after we collect kind of the Wi-Fi data and the tap data, to be able to see what's going on with that client. Think of it like CPU, memory, battery statistics, and stuff like that. But with COVID, we really went back to development and said, hey, look, this COVID piece we see as kind of a long-term piece. We really need to understand this a little bit better. And our real ask was, look, people working from home, this client agent isn't optimized for that. So let's look at, did the client have a problem at their local house, local network? Did the client have a problem on their ISP? Or did the client have a problem with some access into the data center, and IT really needs to solve that problem? Those other two problems, IT doesn't need to solve, but it would be very helpful to say, hey, Dave, I see that you're having problems with Wi-Fi in your house. you're too far from your access point. Go plug in or get closer. Or I see people in your area based on the ISP information to be able to understand, hey, I see not only Dave having a problem, but I see 5 other people in your area having a problem. This has got to be an ISP problem. And so those are the type of narrowing down pieces that the new client agent is coming out with here in the next week or so. Now I'm going to pause just for a second here. Does anybody have any questions about, company, deployment, anything like that before we get into the demo itself? Okay, I don't hear anybody, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
And you did say the client agent is brand spanking new.
It is brand spanking new. It's in fact, I'm getting updates 2 or 3 times a day from the developers.
Oh wow!
Right now, because they're scrambling to finish out just a couple of the bugs and stuff that are in it before it actually gets released.
Cool.
And I can Nick, if you would remind me, it's not something I normally show, but if you can remind me, I will show it kind of towards the end of the demo, because right now it's kind of a standalone piece, and
Sure.
the data is not going into the product just yet. So
Okay.
I'll be able to show that kind of in a separate piece.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
So where we are in the product, let me start with kind of looking at a global view or a US view of sites. So we have this concept of sites, and what we do with these sites is we're going to baseline every individual site. Every network individually is going to act differently. So what does DHCP in my office look like in San Francisco? Or what does DNS look like in my office in New York or in Florida? And so we're going to baseline those, and then we're going to start looking for deviations. What is normal in New York is probably not going to be the same as normal in San Francisco. And so that's really what we're looking at here. So this is a demo site we're looking at. The demo site is live customer data, and there's some anonymization that has gone on here. So some of these things, may not look exactly right. And one specific one right here is site like A1, A2, random names in this particular instance. They'd usually be cities or whatever you call these specific sites, but these are names of specific sites here. Now, in this particular environment right now, kind of looking normal. We have a couple incidents is what we call them. Those incidents are, pretty low priority, P5s, P6s. And it means that a couple of people are having problems, but it's not a big deviation from what's normal in my particular environment. Now, if I drill into the incidents themselves, I'm going to scroll out to a couple of weeks. And let's just kind of see what's happening here. So this is just looking over the past 2 weeks, what incidents have come up, and looking by priority. So you can see that, P4s, there's a lot of P4s that happen here. There's a couple of P2s and P3s that have happened. And then kind of the details of those incidents are down here at the bottom. Now, a couple of things to note here is when we're looking at like a DHCP issue, like this top one, now we're looking at VLANs, and there's 3 VLANs that are affected by this particular DHCP issue. Now, if we look down a little bit further, now we're looking at a DHCP issue, and this DHCP issue is affected clients, and there's 256 clients that are affected by this DHCP issue here. Now I'm going to go into, let's go into this DHCP issue here. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is right here at the top is when our incident has occurred. So this one happened on the 20th between 2:15 and 3:15 a.m. The other thing we're going to take into account is this.
What time zone is that stuff in? Is that in UTC or regional or?
Yeah. So this is actually by whoever accesses the time frame. So I'm in North Carolina, so this is East Coast time. But if you accessed it from Texas, it would be whatever access or whatever your browser is set to. That's the time that it's going to be shown here. So the other piece that happens here is we're going to take usage into account when we're looking at how your network behaves. If you have, let's say, 1,000 people on a network versus 10,000 people on a network, think about like a university, a big corporation. When those wild flux of people come in, the network is going to act differently. So at 3 in the morning, when night shift is in, and you don't have as many people here, that's going to affect the performance of the network. Now, during the day, when you have 10,000, 20,000 people come in, that's going to be very different. And so we take this usage into account to understand, hey, in my network at this particular time, I have 3,744 clients on the network. Now, when I have roughly 3,700 devices on my network, what does it normally perform like? And over here on the right-hand side, this is all these data points are when I have, in this case, it's 3,100, 2,100. This is a rough approximation of when my clients are on here. That all makes up this particular baseline, which is just under 4%. Now you see the shaded area here. This is all standard deviation. Everything inside the shaded area is just normal. This particular red one is the incident that we're looking at right here. So this is the incident that happened on the 20th at 2:15 to 3:15 a.m. And there again, 253 devices were affected. It was almost 2 times my normal. So it's showing 1.8% or 1.8 times right here. Now, if we're looking at these 253 devices, what are some common properties about those devices? And that's what we're looking at down here. So 67% of those devices, we're talking to this DHCP server. And you can click on it and we can go into that particular DHCP server and look at statistics. The model that we see the most in this particular case is in a VIA IP phone. So almost 50% of these devices are IP phones. What VLAN was used the most, and so on. So it's cutting out the irrelevant information. DHCP is not in here. Radius isn't here because it's a DHCP problem, not not something that's going to affect DNS or anything like that.
Hey, David, quick question. So it's able to notice that you have an Avaya phone because of your crawler, and the crawler knows it's Avaya, or is it piping in data from the Avaya IP office somehow as well?
Yeah, so we don't have an integration with Avaya directly, so we're not getting any data from the Avaya telephony. We're looking at this from the span port is where we're able to see that this is an IP phone.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And there's various ways that we identify devices. It could be certain strings that we see from DHCP. It could be certain behaviors that we see when we get into IoT. So it's not just, hey, we go in and you're not going to go in here and label all of these devices. A lot of these devices will already know and just categorize for you. Now there are certain devices that we have more integration. We do have an integration with GE Health. So GE Health has like EKG machines and X-ray machines and heart monitors and all sorts of medical stuff. There is a more in-depth integration with GE that I'm not going to get into probably in this particular demo, unless there's healthcare people here that are interested in that. And if so, please speak up and I'll be happy to speak about it. Now, down here, what we're going to do is we're going to take that 253 devices and we're going to break them up by symptom now. So everybody in those 253 devices were having a problem with DHCP, but they weren't having the same problem. Now, we see right here that the offer time to the client was high for 118 devices. We have a list of those 118 devices over here. You can expand it, you can export it, you can click on it, you can go into more detail. Here's another anonymization that I'm just going to point out. Normally what we would have is actually a host name to a device, or if they logged in with 8021X, we would actually have a username here under the description. So you would know that, hey, this is Dave's device, rather than just kind of a host and a random number. Now, if we go over and look at another set of devices, so this set of devices, so 66 of them were, the offer RSP was bad for this particular set of devices. So, you know, when I call in, even if I had a problem, are people having similar problems with me as I did? Or am I kind of an isolated case? Does, you know, Dave just have a problem nobody else is seeing? Or, you know, is there 50 other people that are having similar problems? So I can be proactive in saying, hey, you know, this information needs to be escalated, because usually like a frontline help desk person would usually go through this and go, wait a minute. Dave is having a problem, but I see a bunch of people having a problem. This is a server problem. This is a much bigger problem than those frontline help desk people usually can figure out what's going on. And then down here, finally, just kind of opening these up to, we saw client properties, the top client properties at the top. Well, that was just the top properties. Now here's some other properties that we expand out a little bit further in, so you can see kind of the whole view that was cut off from the top. Any questions in this section? You know, any particular DNS or any radius, any other type of problem that anybody's interested in looking at before I move into another section? Okay, I will go ahead and move on. This section, we're going to look at historical views, looking at the product for weeks, months, or possibly years to be able to see what does my network perform like. Now, in this particular case, this is client Wi-Fi performance that we're looking at, but let's expand this out. So it's not just Wi-Fi performance that we can look at. You can look at radius, DNS, DHCP, ARP, even down to the application, or, you know, down further, there's going to be some more specific Wi-Fi data. So you have a lot of different metrics to be able to look at through the product. Now, this particular list here that we see, we're going to see it in a couple of different places in the next couple of sections, but I'll bring it up just so everybody can see it each time and just won't scroll through it. Now, what this is showing me on April 19th of 2020 at 3 p.m., we're seeing about 8.7% of my devices having Wi-Fi performance problems. Now, for Wi-Fi performance, what we're talking about is signal to noise issues or layer 2 retransmits or a combination of those. So this is how many people are having problems with Wi-Fi performance. Now, you can, as I said, you can look at this over time. You can also add filters. So if you're interested in different groups of APs, different models of performance, how different SSIDs perform, I'm going to break it up by bands. I think this is kind of a universal, you know, everybody kind of knows that, hey, we want more people on 5 gigahertz. But why do we want more people on 5 gigahertz? Well, there's a whole bunch of underlying reasons, but this really shows that, hey, when I have users on my network, well, if they're on 5 gig, I'm seeing about 4% of my devices having problems versus 13% of my problems, or 13% of my users on 2.4. So kind of that use case of, hey, we want people on 5 gig because it's performing better. Well, now you have proof that it is actually performing better now. So using these filters has been really handy for people to really look at, hey, or even justify, hey, we want to deploy a 5 gig network and management says, nope, deploy 2.4. Well, is that in the best interest of our end users from a performance standpoint? Now, we also have what we call annotations. Now, these particular annotations happen one of two ways. They can be a manual annotation or they can be an automatic annotation. Now, a manual annotation, think of it as a notes field. We have a lot of people using it for change management orders. Hey, we're upgrading whatever. And so they put a note in here that, hey, we're making this particular change. Now, the other way we can get it is that automatic annotation. The only place today that we do automatic annotations are from Wi-Fi controllers, but it's when changes occur. Think of it from the RF perspective or from I upgraded the code on the device. So if I upgraded my Wi-Fi controller from one version of code to another, it would automatically make an annotation here, and it would show me what controllers were upgraded. Or if I change like the power settings, the channel settings, those would all be available in a automatic annotation. And you can get into, pretty specific. We're looking at high usage levels. Let me take these filters off and let me show you what the filters do for a second. Let me go back to a couple week. Okay, so the filter section right now, we're looking at a high usage. So we only want to see when we're sitting, I think it's 90th percentile is what we're looking at. Now, if you have weekends, you have holidays, you have breaks, or you just have some downtime, like in this particular area, we don't see any data points here. We didn't collect any data points that we saw a 90th percentile usage. So we just said, hey, look, in that particular time, if we're looking at high usage, we're not going to take any data points. We still have the data, but if you go to a lower usage level, those will show in. So we still have data, but it's usage based. So as I said, when breaks, holidays, weekends, just when that downtime occurs, we're able to say, hey, this is what the performance looks like when you have a high usage versus low usage here. You also have the function of, instead of a nice, pretty flowing chart like this, let's kind of get into, well, what does the data actually look like? So your peaks and your valleys, when is there problems? When are, kind of the most used times, less used times? These are hourly data points now. So it's not averaged out like it was pretty in the last graph. Really what I use this for is looking at my peaks and valleys. How good did I get? How bad did I get in certain areas? That's what's interesting to me in this particular area. Open it up for questions before I move on. Okay. I'm going to go into the benchmark section. So the benchmarks, we're going to take your baselines, and there's really two ways to use it: industry benchmarks and internal benchmarks. So if we're looking at industry benchmarks, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at what industry you're in. We're going to look at roughly the same size. And if we're looking at Wi-Fi, we're going to look at the Wi-Fi manufacturer. So what that's really going to show in this particular case, since we're looking at a hospital, we're looking at other hospitals. I'm not sure if this one is Aruba or Cisco or Mist or who it is, but with similar equipment, at least the manufacturer is going to be the same and roughly the same size to be able to say, well, what does the industry look like at hospitals for Wi-Fi performance? And we can see the industry is performing at 7.3%. This particular site is almost at 9%. So we're not performing as well as the industry is. Now, it can show up in green if you're performing better. It show up in yellow if you're performing at industry. Or if you're out of the standard deviation, it'll show up red like it shows up here. Now, I'm going to click on the metric. Now, we saw the metrics before, but I'm going to bring them up again just so you guys see. You can look at all the same metrics that we saw before, including applications, to be able to do these comparisons. Now, the only ones that really make sense from a, hey, do they have the same manufacturer, is on the Wi-Fi side of things. The application, there's so many pieces going out to the internet to be able to look at that we don't necessarily know, firewall, bandwidth, and that sort of thing. But we can see right here in purple, this is the site we're looking at. This is General Hospital, and it's the 8.9% of users having performance problems that we saw just a moment ago. Now, how I look at this is really, how do I compare to my peers? And we also see some other hospitals that are performing about the same, but it also gives me a way to look at, well, what would be a good goal to shoot for from a performance standpoint? I've had a lot of, especially executives go, well, why do we have anybody having problems? Why can't we make this this number zero? And it really comes down to how much money do you really want to spend on IT personnel in the field helping every individual get to that zero number? It would just cost too much. And so this gives me an idea of, well, if I'm at 9%, I should be able to be in the 5%, 4% area if we work hard to fix whatever problems I have. Now, if we look down here, we're able to see what type of problems are coming across. Is poor coverage or interference, but you also can see what some of these other sites are performing like. Now, these other sites, they're random numbers. These are other hospitals. We do have this friend list. So if you're interested in being friends with anybody on here, or if you know that somebody, hey, I know that this particular school, this is really where we see this friend list, and this is where the request came from. Hey, we're interested in being connected with, UNC Chapel Hill or Stanford or whoever, and they're not comparable. Well, you can just let us know and we can match those up into a friend list for you, so you'll have that comparison.
And is the telemetry here opt-in kind of thing when you get started on the platform?
Yeah, so everybody participates in it in a public cloud setting. So if you're a public cloud customer, you are already opted in. There's no way to opt out. If you are a private cloud, you have the option to opt into it. It's defaulted as an opt-out. Even if you don't opt in to share your data, you will get that data shared from our other customers from the cloud piece back to you. So it will share regardless if you are sharing or not. Now, the other way we can look at it is from an internal benchmark standpoint. So this is looking at sites. Now, this particular site, since it's a hospital, a lot of hospitals don't have 10 large hospitals. They usually have, a couple of clinics, maybe some remote doctor's offices. And so in this particular case, these comparables can vary widely. But if you had a site, or if you had a company, let's say like a retail store, if you had a bunch of retail office locations or a bunch of branches for like banking, these would be very, very easy to compare, branch 1 to branch 2 and so on. But this is just looking kind of the same thing, looking at how the performance is at different sites that we saw earlier. These sites, there again, these are named random in here. These would be named something that would make more sense, not A12, A2, and so on. But there again, you get the same information to be able to do those comparisons to find out, well, why is A27 performing so much worse than everybody else? So I look at A27, okay, clients moving. Yeah, clients aren't having a problem roaming, but they've got a ton of interference. So those are the type of comparisons that we're able to look at really quickly to understand why are these numbers so much higher in one site than another. Questions, thoughts? Anybody want to dive into anything specific before I move into our what we call health and remediation? Is any of this interesting? Is somebody give me a thumbs up that we're hitting some good information, or am I just totally off of the mark for you guys?
Well, I was going to ask a question. I don't know a lot about your product, but I understand the analytics and security aspect of it. But what kind of access points are you using for this?
so we don't sell access points. So we integrate with Cisco, Aruba, Meraki, Mist, Extreme. Think that's all that we do today. So
Okay.
it's a pretty wide, and it can be a mixed environment. So if it's not just, if you don't have just Cisco everywhere and you have a mixed environment, we're a great solution for that.
Well, I mean, the only reason I'm asking is that is because, at least for me, I have probably 90 or 85, like 85 to 90% of customers on Ubiquiti, and a few on Meraki, and some on Sophos or Cambium. It depends, but Cisco dependency for me is really hard. So that's why I came with the question.
No, I appreciate that. Now we've heard a little bit of people asking for Ubiquiti. Normally what we find is that Ubiquiti customers usually either don't have a big deployment, or the budget is pretty tight. And so that's why we haven't picked that up from a product standpoint. I think it's quite capable. What we're doing isn't specific to a single product. I think the information would be there in Ubiquiti. It's just a customer base we don't see yet.
Assuming that we set up the correct traps, you would be able to read any brand equipment, right?
Yeah, but the traps and the SNMP are going to be specific to the brand. So we would need to we would need to do development work with whoever the company is. We don't have to work with that company, but we would need a mid table to be able to pull and know what the results of like certain SNMP strings are going to be coming back.
So there's no way to bring in the MIBs yourself or anything, or upload a set of MIBs for you?
Not today, there's not. Any other questions? Okay. So in health and remediation, this is another area that this area I really spend a lot of time in. Really focusing in on what type of problem I'm looking for. So kind of before, the system's kind of bubbling up, hey, there's problems here, there's something to look at. Here's where you really go to say, well, I'm interested in a specific issue, and how do I narrow down my data to get it out of the system? Now, we do have a full API, so it's based on GraphQL. So you're able to pull all of the data for every individual client, all of the incidents and stuff we generate. You're able to pull that out and do whatever you want with that data. But we needed something in the platform for people that aren't coders and didn't want to write API calls. Now I pulled this up again just so you see we can look at different metrics. If we stick on Wi-Fi for a second. Now, if you're interested in, let's say, poor coverage in your network, so we're going to do poor coverage and we're going to include here. So what this is going to do is take every card now and just tell me who has poor coverage, what APs, what clients, what AP groups, what SSIDs, and so on. So I'm only looking for poor coverage in this particular case. You may say something like, I don't care about these 3 SSIDs, so we're going to exclude those 3 SSIDs. So now we're just looking at a couple SSIDs. And so every time you're including, excluding all of the cards, do that. You can get down to a specific, AP or a specific client if you're interested in. You also have the option to do show more. This is going to show you the top 50 clients in this case, or 50 APs. Normally what we find is you have a handful, 3, 4, 5, maybe up to 10 that are having problems, and the rest are very low in usage problems. So you see, this particular user, 1%. So the 50th one's not very interesting. I wouldn't bother there. But if you look closer to the top, well, this user has 9% of problems with poor coverage. Well, I'd be interested in figuring out where that user is. What are they doing and where are they?
Hey, David, I think you kind of answered this before, but we had another question. Are there plans for integration with Ubiquiti at some point? Because I know a lot of customers in the SMB space are going to be using that pretty much as our standard.
Yeah, as of right now, I have not seen it on the roadmap. That doesn't mean that there's not talks about it, but I have not seen it, unfortunately.
Okay.
So is the SMB even on the roadmap?
Is S&B? I'm sorry, what was the question?
I think he's asking, are small to medium business needs on the roadmap, right, Jared?
So we definitely have some small and medium businesses that are running our product, but they just happen to be running with hardware we support today. So if there's a business case for it, please let me know. I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to development and our product team about support. We are supporting more and more products as they come out, especially since we were acquired by VMware. You know, that acquisition has helped us be able to expand in a couple of different areas that we hadn't been able to expand just from a resource problem to begin with.
Yeah, we have feedback tools, Jared, that we can take that feedback. Actually, I'm going to do the same thing and say, hey, a lot of people use Ubiquity. I think it'd be great to add it. So hopefully that'll carry some weight. We'll see how it goes.
Well, and nothing against this product, but you know, everything I see here, as somebody who deals exclusively in the SMB sector, you know, even if I'd love to have larger customers, I don't. This kind of tool is not very useful if it's only going to be dealing with the brands that sector can't buy in the first place. So, not that it's a bad tool, and God help me, even in a small business, you need analytics nowadays. You need to know where your problems are and things like that. I mean, it's just the way everything's going with technology, but they won't buy into the tools if the tools don't use the hardware that they can manage to buy.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good point.
Completely understand. I think it's more of use case driven from what I've seen in the past. You know, show me customers that, you know, help me bring that use case to product, and I'll be more than happy to make that argument for you.
Well, the use case is right there. It's just what Jared is trying to say is that there's a lot of customers that can't afford those type of infrastructure, and maybe that's what your point was. You were trying to say that you're catering to a different type of client, but here we have a lot of SMBs. I'm not saying everybody here, but yeah, I think that was the point.
Okay. Any more questions here on the health remediation section? And if not, we'll jump into a single client view. So that search bar at the top is probably the most used part of the product. If you're searching for, like myself, D Dipert, you would see what devices I have. So instead of asking the customer, you know, IP address, MAC address, something identifying that most end users don't know, what did they log into the network with if they're using 802.1x? If they're not using 802.1x, then we don't have their username, and you would have to go through and ask for a MAC or an IP address or something like that to identify them. Now, this first area here, general information about that box: IP address, MAC address, host name, OS, you know, what SSID have they connected to. You even have some history here, like what APs has this particular device been on. So this is the history of the last 10 APs, or, you know, DNS. This particular device has only used this particular one DNS server, but you have 2 DHCP servers over the past week or so. So as I said, just general information is what we're looking at here to be able to kind of see where is this device, how's it connected, and where are they on my network. The next area is incidents. So we looked at global incidents, kind of the first area we looked at, but every device that was part of an incident it's going to show up under that device. So one person calling in can really alert you to a larger problem going on. In this case, we see, you know, ARP is a problem, DHCP and Wi-Fi performance is all problems for this particular user. Gives you some information about kind of where we see the problem, kind of what's the commonality, how often these problems are occurring. How often the incident is occurring for this device is what's showing down here. So on the 20th, it happened for 2 different hours. The 19th, he had 3 different hours of Wi-Fi performance problems. And then over here in our attributes section, to give you a wider view of, well, is it a single person having a problem, or are there multiple people having problems in either an AP group, with the OS, or so on. So you see that over in this section right here. Now, every time you would click on a different time or a different type of incident, it's going to change those metrics for you to look at. And then if I scroll down here, here's where we're going to have all of our raw metrics collected for every single device. So anything that we collect about a user is open. We're not hiding the information. You have the ability to look at the information in its raw format, and that's what it's looking at down here. It just happens to be graphed over time for you. Now, another feature I like is, you know, this spike right here is interesting, is usually something I'm concerned about or I want to look further into. Instead of having to mess with your time selector, just highlight it, just zoom into it. It'll give you more details about, you can go down to that minute-to-minute statistics if you zoom in here. So you see these layer 2 retransmits as they go up, and then they fall off very quickly after their SNR, which is this top right box, gets back to a decent state. Now, this is Wi-Fi, but you have DHCP, you have DNS, radius, all the way down to an application level. And I'm going to circle back into an application for a user. You know, after we go through the application piece, I'll circle back into a user to show you that user application performance on whatever application we select. And then over here on the timeline, there's a lot of Wi-Fi events over here, but you're also going to see like radius events, DHCP, DNS events, how long those events occurred. So you see right here, well, how long did this DHCP process take? So you have a timestamp of, hey, this device got DHCP at 1:43 on, what is it, the 15th, and it took this amount of time. So all of that's logged over here in my time frame. Questions about in-user devices before we go on into an application piece? Okay, I'm gonna scoot over here into an application. So natively, there's about 350 apps that are native to the product. There is an integration coming here very soon, like I think it's announced next week, with the Velo VCEs that we will be integrating with those VCEs, and they already do DPI with applications, and we're going to be pulling in about 3,000 applications with the DPI used through the Velo VCEs. Now, we also have the option of custom applications. If you want to do a custom application, all you need to do is, if you put a fully qualified domain name in, an IP address, a subnet, with or without port numbers, you can make a custom application. So anything you want to track from an end user perspective, you can put it in here, as long as you have an FQDN or an IP address to be able to track. Now, most of our applications are going to look like Facebook in this particular case. They're going to be set up very similar. Even your custom apps are going to look like this. The exceptions to that are things that we get API calls from. So Cisco UCM, Skype for Business, Teams is coming. We're talking to Microsoft. We're in development there. Zoom is another one. And then GE Healthcare would be another application that looks different. We just have more data from those particular sources. But all of the regular apps we're going to look at comes down to, here's a list of my 100 top talkers, most amount of bandwidth to or from the application. Here's a list of all of my other users, and there's 4,782 devices that access Facebook on this network. When we get down here into our charts area, I use these 3 charts at the top for capacity planning. Now, if it's an app that you guys own and you guys need capacity planning information for the servers, great, fine, use it, not a problem. I usually think of it as capacity planning for the network. I need to make sure I have enough bandwidth from the core to the WAN to get to whatever application is that we're looking at here. And so we're looking at users per minute, data sent and received, TCP packets to be able to help with those that information. And then if I look down a little bit further, this is where I'm looking at performance of the application. In this case, we're looking at TCP retransmits, TCP round trip time, and if the application is HTTP, we'll see the wait times for HTTP. This gives me a good understanding of how does the application perform on my network, kind of as a whole. You could also, everything we've seen in the product so far has been specific to overall, which means all of my sites together. But you can narrow this down to a specific site and say, how did this application perform at this site in totality? Or you can look at it for an end user device. And that's what we're going to look at next. So I'm going to go up here. Let me pick this particular device. We're back into the end user device here, kind of the same information that we've gone over. Now down here at the bottom, looking at the charts, this is the application, in this case, Facebook. How did this user access Facebook? What is this particular user's, how much data they sent and received, how many packets, what's their round trip look like? So you got very, very detailed information that you can go through about a single user getting to and from an application. Questions on the application piece, or making custom applications, or looking at applications for a single user? Okay.
Hopefully everybody's still awake out there. I know we're kind of at the hour mark. We blocked 2 hours. Still got 19 people, so hopefully it's okay to keep going a little bit. But certainly, like we said, if you have questions, definitely ask David, unmute yourself, or put it in chat. And if you do have specific product feedback like we heard earlier, put that in the chat and we'll capture that, okay? Appreciate it.
Absolutely appreciate the feedback. That helps us build a better product. So everything you guys give us, we definitely look at. Just to let you know, I was the first field person hired for Nyansa, and so going back into development and saying, hey, we need to tweak some things to get a better result. That's probably the best part of my job right there. So looking into a single access point is what we're going to do next. Set up very similar to what we saw a couple minutes ago on an end user device. I look at it as kind of the general information at the top, IP address, MAC address, what controller is it talking to, what code is it on. The next area is going to be the radio properties. So what SSIDs are being broadcast, what's the transmit power, what's the channel width, that sort of information is going to be in the channel, in the radio properties. If the AP was part of any incidents, and what we're looking at for incidents and APs, think of it as like high channel usage, high number of users on an AP. Those are the sort of things that we're looking at for the channel usage or the AP incidents page. List of my clients, who's connected to this particular AP. So we have a list of clients here. We see a couple of clients right here that have some poor Wi-Fi performance. This isn't showing very well because this particular AP doesn't have a lot of neighbors. Normally this shows up like a big pinwheel. And so you'll have a bunch of neighbors here. And so this particular neighbor right here being in red, that indicates to me that there's co-channel interference between the AP I'm looking at right here and the AP that it's its neighbor. So they're both on channel 6 in this particular case. And we see the SNR showing up between these two APs.
Hey, David, in this screen, I assume we would see any and all IoT devices that may be reaching out to that access point as well, yeah?
Yes, that's correct. If an IoT device just shows up as a device here, there's some more specific pieces that we'll show in just a couple minutes in the IoT space, but they would just be a device here. Let me go to all and see. Okay, so yeah, so this particular AP just doesn't, there's just not a lot of coverage in this particular area. But you also see this darker green line versus this faint green line. That's also showing me that the SNR between APs is different. In this case, it's 35 versus 21. So quickly, if you saw kind of a bigger picture here, you'd be able to understand, what APs are really close at a high signal strength, what APs are further away, and we can faintly hear them. We do that very similar in the rogue APs. So rogue APs just being any AP that we're not part of the system that we're monitoring today. So in this particular case, if the neighbor set up another network, we would show that as a rogue over here. And then similar in the charts function, these are our raw metrics we're collecting about every AP. So you have access to all this information that we're collecting. And then we don't see any events in the timeline. The timeline events are going to be like AP up and down, channel changes, power changes, DFS events. Those are going to be all the sort of things that show up in this event timeline. And in this particular case, we just don't have any events for this AP. Anything on the AP before we move into kind of a wider server, looking at services like DHCP, DNS, Radius? Okay, so every server we find DHCP, Radius, DNS servers, we're going to automatically identify them because we're going to see traffic to and from those servers. So we're automatically going to be able to identify them. Then we're going to list them out here that you're going to be able to go into specific servers if you'd like. I'm going to go into the server group. So it's all of the DHCP servers that I see on this particular network. You're also able to see, what VLANs that these DHCP servers are handling, how many clients do they see, and so on. And then when we get down here, here's the metrics that we're collecting. Looking at what's going on for this particular server group. These are the same sort of metrics that we would see under an individual server. So if I clicked on, let's say this particular server, same sort of thing. We're going to see the same metrics under these charts that we collected over all of the servers. Now we only have a single server that we're looking at. So if a single server was having a problem, you would be able to dig into that single server and be able to see, well, when did they have that problem? When did it start? And you'd be able to see that. Now you see right here, these failures. So DHCP failures, they were going on about a second, and then all of a sudden they ticked up to about 10 seconds in this particular case, and have been fairly steady at about 10 seconds for a while. So somebody made a change here on 9/11 for whatever reason, and it caused failures to be much slower than they were before. Now the reporting function itself is based off of our GraphQL API. So all of our reports are based off of what we use in the API. You can run these reports, download them, specific sites, overall. Most of our reports are going to be in CSV format when they come out. So they're more of a technical, kind of nature of them. There are some visual templates that you can use. These are more for kind of a high level executive summary. Now, one of the AP reports that I specifically like looking at is likely inactive APs. In likely inactive APs, it takes really analytics into what's going on. So what we're looking at is, number one, is the radio up on an AP? Answer is yes, we move on to the next one. Are there active clients that have connected over a certain period of time on that AP? And if the answer is no, then we really start looking at the RF neighborhood for that particular AP. So are there APs around it that are, see it from an RF perspective, that those other APs have taken client traffic? So they've seen associations in that same period of time. And so if that answer is yes, then what we're looking at is there may be some kind of hung radios. And we found in a lot of environments, there are APs out there. They show green, they show active, but they're not accepting any connections from clients. And so a lot of times a reboot fixes that, but just being able to identify those devices that are likely having a problem with the radio has been kind of a problem for our clients. And so yeah, that's how that particular report was made. So I'm really, look at the performance side of things. I'm really done looking at the performance side of Voyance, and I'm ready to step into the IoT security function. Unless anybody has any questions on the performance side of things, we can step into the IoT security side. I'll let that kind of sit for a second for people to get unmuted if you have questions.
So before you move on, you said the whole thing starts with your collector that you put on a tap, and then that collector is what's reporting to the device in the cloud?
That is correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was understanding the flow.
Yep.
And then your new client would be reporting directly to the cloud?
I'm sorry, you broke up. Can you repeat that for me?
Your new endpoint client or redesigning endpoint client that you talked about, that would then report directly to the cloud or back to the collector?
Yeah, it's going to report to the cloud.
So that obviously the question thought process there was COVID, because these are people at home and making sure and what it's talking to and all that.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I'll go ahead and skip over the IoT portion. We can come back to that in a minute since you brought up.
Don't skip it. I think a number of us want to hear it.
Oh, no. I'm just going to wait. Since you brought up the client agent, I'm going to bring up the client agent, then I'll come back into the IoT security piece. Just because you brought up the client piece. Let me go ahead and pull that up and share that out. Okay, I'm gonna have to do my desktop in order for you to see.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so really it came down to the old client. You had capabilities to do tests like synthetic testing, but especially from home, it was like, well, what is their gateway? And it was like you would have to know everybody's gateway, which made no sense at all from an administrative standpoint. So what we asked for is we wanted to do some quick tests to your home gateway. And so this is just giving us some general information about that. What SSID are you on? What modes are supported? Just some general information to give IT some idea of, what do you have installed at your house? Today, as this is getting rolled out in beta, the first phase is really self-help. It's going to be, people are going to deploy it to be able to understand, hey, is my device fairly, working fairly good? That data that we're collecting is actually being pushed to the back end. It's not being displayed yet. And so you will see in the, probably in the next month or so, additional data that shows up under the end user device. And so we didn't get into, all the details in the charts view, but you would see more data in that charts view with a client agent. So, this is about my network that I'm joined at. What speed is it? Now, this is expanded out. This gives you all the gory details that we're collecting. By default, this is really all that's shown is here at the top. This line kind of delineates what's there. So, somebody that's not terribly technical can look at it and say, oh, I got good speed, I got good signal, I got good signal to noise. Well, how's my internet looking? Now, here's where we're doing some synthetic tests that are canned, but you also have the ability to do synthetic tests that you put in. So here are kind of some combination. But what are some networks that we want to reach? As I said, some of these will be built into the product. I imagine that VMware and Nyansa.com are both going to be built into the product. And 8888, I know, is another DNS server that we're going to be built in. Some of these other ones may be taken out, but you can also make your own synthetic tests. Are you wanting to do, like a curl or a particular get to a website or a particular file? You could put that in here to be able to do those from the web the web browser that we just saw. And then the VPN is going to have nothing canned. All of these are going to have to be custom because we don't know what's going to go over your VPN. And so these would be all synthetic tests that you would set up, similar to the ones you just saw for the internet. But these are the ones that that engineering has put in my particular one to do their testing with. So that's really the client agent as of today. Today it supports Windows, Mac. We're in the Apple Store, kind of the process right now. I don't think it has been approved. And then Android. Those are the 4 operating systems we're going to support. We've already had requests for Linux and some thin client support. So we're looking into that, and we think that especially the thin client is going to come out pretty quickly because I think it's based very similar to the Android functions. Questions here? Anything you want to look at specifically? And if not, we'll go back into the IoT security piece.
Actually, the only thing I was going to ask is, can I have it go to certain things? And you already said we can.
Yep.
For example, if I was using this, obviously the network in the office, the main network, I would have stuff set up to go to our main, all our various things we hit on the internet. But then for the users that are working from home, I need to know that they can reach those same tools. And you're saying you'd be able to put that in there. So yeah, that was really the biggest reason I was asking and questioning how this worked.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, we definitely know that the work from home here is here to stay, and so this is kind of to help address some of that. And so hopefully it will address it once it's released. As I said, beta. I definitely am getting some updates every day on the code coming out to test to see what's going on. So I'll go ahead and I think I stopped sharing. And we'll share this back out and let's go into IoT. So in the IoT security space, what we're doing is, first of all, identifying the devices. So let's look at IoT groups right here. So this is not an encompassing list. This, as I said, is a end user network that we're getting our data from. So it may not have all of our categories of devices. This being a hospital, obviously they've got a lot of devices that are medical equipment on their network. But identifying the devices and categorizing them is number one. So we see like Avaya phones, they have 2,128 IP phones, to where the Zebra PPIDs, there are 481 of those. So just kind of quickly looking through that, and then what SSIDs are they on, what VLANs are they on, how much traffic are they sending, and so on. Now the dashboard itself takes those devices and looks at them from an anomaly viewpoint. So first of all, the categorization of those devices, and then what we're looking at inside the category of device, what are those devices doing? What external destinations are they talking to? What VLANs are they on? What SSIDs are they on? Under the external destinations, we do a couple things. Is we look at statistical, high risk, and behavioral differences of those devices. So are devices statistically talking to more hosts than other devices? Are they talking to high risk, and we integrate with Bright Cloud, and that's part of the service that you would purchase, is the Bright Cloud subscription service that we'd be able to look at the destination and the reputation to that destination. And then the behavioral of the devices. So is the category device, did it start talking to a new destination that no other device in that category has talked to before? That's what we mean by behavioral. Now, let's see, I opened, yeah, this is the one. Okay, so I looked up an EKG machine. So in this particular case, there's 58 EKG machines here. Now, looking at the VLANs and the SSIDs here, what we see a lot of times is these devices are hard to manage. Like if somebody gets called out and says, hey, this EKG machine doesn't work, you may go out and put it on a different SSID, test it. Hey, you know what? It works now. Turn right, walk away. And it wasn't on the secure SSID that it should be on. And so that's really why we are looking at the VLANs and the SSIDs, is to be able to just call out, hey, are these devices on the right SSID, on the right VLAN? And if not, we can identify what devices are not on the right VLAN or SSID. The next area is looking at the group level to be able to understand what destinations has this group talked to. So all 58 devices, who have they talked to? And we see right here that one of them is high risk and there's several suspicious. You can do show more or show all, and it really does get ugly if you do a show all, but it will show you every detail destination that it talked to, kind of overall. So you can get into pretty specific, how many times did it go to, whatever destination. Looking at the data sent and received from those devices, just graphed over time here. This is where we get into the outliers here. So looking at my 58 devices, most of them are really talking to less than 200 destinations. Most of them are probably talking to less than 10. But we have two devices right here. These two devices are talking to 325, 330 devices, destinations. Those are my outliers that I'd be looking at here. Or from a high risk standpoint, here's some high risk destinations that some devices have talked to. Now we have a list of those devices that we're talking to high risk down here. You can also see a full inventory here of all of my 58 devices that we categorized in this group. You can also go into very specific device details. So if we open up another screen real quick, we can look at, now this is the end device, kind of what we saw before, except for now it has the IoT context to it, which is the device behavior. Now, did this device talk to, a high risk destination? If you search for this device, you would see it the same way. I just happened to get through it through the IoT dashboard to start with, but it does give you a little bit more context in the IoT space than just an end user device has.
quick question, David. Up there at the top of this screen, I see the OS and version information. Should that or will it track firmware for the IoT devices in any way, or is that really mostly for endpoint devices, mobile
Yeah,
devices,
so really,
workstations
it
and
really
stuff?
depends on the device.
Okay.
Specifically in healthcare, the OS, and there's a lot of detailed information that comes through HL7. And so if this device isn't talking HL7, or we couldn't identify it from some other means, that's why this is probably not filled in. This is probably some proprietary OS that we've not seen or identified before. But HL7 is probably our primary way for medical devices to give us that information, because it is very, very detailed when it's talking HL7. So hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
If it was identified, would you be able to trigger an update through here?
No, you can't trigger any updates from here. We are a passive system as of today, so we're not interfering with packet flows or any management of devices or anything like that. Not saying that may not happen in the future, but as of today, that's not a possibility. And actually, if we're looking at medical devices, that would be a huge no-no in the medical device field. Going through the the whole process in order to do something like that would probably take 5 or 6 years in order to be able to interact with those devices to be able to do updates and stuff, just from a healthcare standpoint. So I went back. Did I answer everybody's questions here? Anybody else have any other questions? Okay. I went back into the Philips EKG piece, and we're going to look at our benchmark section. So if we've seen Philips EKG machines on any other network, we're going to be able to give you some statistical information about them, similar to what we did with Wi-Fi and looking at percentage of users having problems. But this is a little bit different in what we're going to show you. So, just kind of looking at what devices I'm looking, my devices here, and then these are other EKG machines on other devices. So looking at the percentage of destinations that are either uncategorized, suspicious, high risk, and so on, just so you have some idea of, well, if it's talking to some suspicious destinations, that's not always a problem. But do you see other networks talking to some suspicious networks? And in this case, they do. Now,
Hey, David, real quick. Someone's asking if this will work with Siemens medical devices as well. I would think so, but I wanted you to confirm that.
Yeah. So it will work with Siemens. It'll work with Philips. We have a better integration with GE because they're one of our reselling partners, and actually they rebrand the product as OnWatch NP. But it doesn't matter the brand. We can identify them. So yes, it'll absolutely work with Siemens. And what we see for Philips would be very similar to what we see for Siemens.
Cool, thank you.
Now down here, looking at what destinations that they're talking to by country, obviously looking at China and Russia are kind of one of those ones that usually pop up that are like, hey, I'm really kind of worried about it. But also understanding that, hey, these devices may need to talk to some countries other than whatever country you're in. And so understanding the purple is my site. This is the site we're looking at. These are other sites. And so just, being on par with, hey, we are talking to the same countries. And how much data is being transmitted there. The destination, the amount of hosts that we're talking to. So internally and externally. So just kind of seeing how my network or how my devices are really set up. Are we, you know, kind of overutilizing certain features that other people have maybe turned off? So we see right here, you know, we're talking to some more destinations than others are, but it's not vastly different here. You know, it's not like, you know, we have, you know, 50% of our devices are talking to 1,000 hosts and everybody else is talking to, you know, 5. Those are the type of anomalies we're looking for there. The amount of traffic, data sent and received, you know, comparing you to your peers. And then looking at device activity. How often are these devices active on my network and doing something? Probably a poor example to show that because these devices aren't really doing a whole lot. But we've had several hospitals come to us and they may have a whole storage room full of whatever device and they've got a request to order new devices. Well, are those devices just not being utilized and they're being, you know, kind of shoved in corners and in closets everywhere? And as long as they're talking to the network, we're able to track those devices. And then finally down here at the protocols, you know, what protocols are these devices talking from a percentage standpoint? So, so that's looking at our IoT piece. Kind of the other side of this, which I don't have any way to show you, is being able to update like your Radius server. So we integrate with ClearPass, and we also integrate with Cisco ICE to be able to take action on if we see anomalous activity. And so we don't actually take the action. We would update something like the Radius server, which would have rules in it to be able to say, well, if device, you know, is talking to suspicious destinations, you know, quarantine it, kick it off the network, do whatever, you know, you want to do with it. But that option is there in the background, kind of outside of our product, to be able to make those determinations should you want to. So that's really, you know, what I have to show today. More than happy to stick around, answer questions, or if there's something specific anybody wants to go over, more detail, more than happy to stay around for that also. So I'm gonna leave it open for you guys.
While there's silence, just a couple housekeeping items. Just note, everybody that attended this meeting is recorded. It will be on the Dallas-Fort Worth SpiceCorps page in the community, and I'll post a link here in the chat in just a minute. If you are a Spice head who joined and you think I don't know your handle in the community, send it to me in chat in the next couple of minutes. I think I know a lot of you here. If you're not in the SpiceWorks community, make sure and join. You can do that for free. Find the SpiceCorps in your local area. We bring technical content and get nerdy, of course. Anybody else? Well, actually, you can go back and listen to the sessions from Spice World that happened this past week. I put links in the chat for that. You got Microsoft Ignite this week, and then VMworld next week. I imagine there'll be some more sessions on Nyansa and other things if you have an interest there. I put links in the chat for all that stuff, but we'll leave it open a little bit longer for any questions for David. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and be a part of this, everybody. Hope it was a good part of your day.
Well, I appreciate you you inviting me. I hope it was useful for everybody, and you know, hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
Yeah, good job, man.
Thank you.
I learned some stuff too, quite a bit.
Great, that's a goal. I'm glad you learned something.
Yeah, and for those who are DFW SpiceCorps members that oftentimes see me and others in person. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again in the next several months, but we'll just have to see how it goes.
I just didn't want to burden everyone with my lunchtime.
Oh, you're fine. It's all about the lunch and learn, man.
Gives me something to do while I'm driving. That's why I do this.
Yep. Anybody
And,
have?
and I'm also annoying and ask questions.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, man. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording since I got that on the recording, Jared. I'll just go ahead and stop it.